Hello, everyone. My name is Jasmine Scott. I am the program manager for Langston, and we are the nonprofit arts organization based in Seattle, Washington, and we are the presenters of the Seattle Black Film Festival. Let's get into this workshop. I want to first introduce our host for this afternoon, Shannan Johnson. She is a former programming and development, or you're actually a current, right? But you're on hiatus, you said. But you're a development TV executive and you offer script consulting services to develop screenwriters of all levels. You became a junior creative executive at NBC Universal at the Sci-Fi Channel. While there, you helped writers and producers take their ideas from pitch to production while serving as co-executive producer on Alphas, Being Human, Haven, Sanctuary, Warehouse 13, and other sci-fi dramedies. So you have quite an extensive resume that I'm sure people are going to be interested in hearing more about. Today, Shannan owns and operates The Professional Pen, which is a full-service script consulting service where she assists emerging screenwriters, established actors and directors, showrunners, and producers. So we'll learn a little bit more about Shannan, and then Shannan will introduce our guests. So I'm going to pass it on to you.
Thank you so much, and welcome everybody. Thank you for being here today on this Saturday. And like Jasmine said, give us your coins. Yes, this is a nonprofit and we're out here trying to make sure that artists can find their way through this industry. So go ahead and drop a quarter, drop $5, drop 10, drop whatever it is you feel. But let's get into this, guys. I want to introduce our panelists today. We have Numa Perrier and Patrik-Ian Polk. Now, you may know Numa from JEZEBEL on Netflix, and she has some news that's in deadline these days, and I'm going to let her talk about a little bit later that I'm sure she's excited about. You may know Patrik from his days with Noah's Ark, and then he just did a little something with Noah's Ark if you've been paying attention, and so we'll let him talk about that a little bit, but he also had some time on Being Mary Jane. So we're lucky today because we have multi-hyphenates with us today, okay? We have we have an actress, producer, director, and writer, which means they know all sides of this industry. So they're going to be able to give us so much information today. So the first thing that I want to ask you guys to do is to give us just a tiny, quick, concise moment about your backstory. Like, how did you get here? Were you always knowing that you were going to get into the film industry? Were you in some other career before you made that jump? And then what made you decide to take that leap? Let's start with Numa.
Okay, well, hello, everybody. Thank you for coming. To jump in and answer the question, I've always known that I wanted to be part of the film industry, movies, as an actress at first. And then when I came out to LA, I always knew that once I got out of high school that I wanted to come to Los Angeles because that's just what I always heard and always knew, like, you got to go to LA if you want to really take this serious. So I remember counting the days down, even when I was a kid, 10, 11, 12 years old. I would actually calculate the days until I turned 18 where I could, go and come. And I didn't come here right at 18, but I definitely showed up in my early 20s, jumped into an acting class that also had directors in the class. And so I've been writing my whole life ever since I learned how to read and write. I've been writing fiction and novels and dramatic things. It's just always really been part of my makeup and my purpose. And I knew that from an early age, but learning all of the other sides of the business and evolving into a filmmaker came through my acting classes, observing the other directors in class and how they would approach a scene differently than I would as an actor, and starting to become really fascinated with that process. And we started to make our own short films inside of that class.
Oh, wow.
So that's when I made my first short film. So in a way, it was kind of low-key film school. Yeah. But for me, my entry point was as an actor. And then I blossomed into the multi-hyphenate space, and really understood that, you know, each piece of that is a piece of the whole pie. So that's my story.
That's awesome. I often tell people that that writers should take acting classes and actors should take writing classes, because if you understand that other part of the industry, it can influence your creative portion. So that's awesome that you started in that place, and then being able to see what directors were doing made you excited about that other thing that you wanted to learn. Well, great. So Patrick, what's your story? Patrik-Ian?
My story. I grew up in Mississippi, and at some point, I decided I wanted to be a director. I think, you know, this was sort of before we had like sort of all the behind the scenes entertainment news. So I didn't really know what the positions were. I didn't really even know what a director was until I think Spike Lee came on the scene, and my mother got me the first book that he wrote. He wrote a book about making She's Gotta Have It. And that's where I first learned about film school. So at that point, I decided, okay, I'm gonna go to film school. I always knew that I would leave Mississippi. And basically I ended up going to college on the East Coast, and then ended up at film school at USC. And left film school and just started working. I kind of became an executive kind of by accident. I was temping on a job developed at the film division of MTV, and they were a brand new division. MTV was really, really hot at the time. They hadn't even really peaked quite yet. And so, sorry. And I'm giving the Beyonce effect.
Yes.
And so I kind of suddenly became this young, you know, Black exec at one of the hottest production companies in town. And I was barely in my 20s. And I worked on some big movies, and then got plucked away from them by Babyface and Tracy Edmonds, and worked on more big movies. And while I was working for them, I convinced them to finance my first film, Punks, which was 20 years ago exactly this year, premiered at Sundance. And so I took that point to sort of leave the executive ranks and go be a filmmaker full time. And eventually I did Noah's Ark, the series. I've done 3 films, I think, since then. Blackbird with Monique Isaiah Washington, The Skinny. And then more recent years, working in series television. So Being Mary Jane season 4, I wrote and produced the series finale, 2-hour finale that aired last year with Morris Chestnut and Michael Ealy. And then I also worked on P-Valley, which premieres tomorrow, which everyone needs to watch. So I was the number 2 producer on that, working with Katori Hall. That was my last gig, which went on for a couple of years. And that one I'm really excited about, because that's a really special show. It's definitely the Blackest thing on television, hands down.
I know that's right.
Make sure you check that out tomorrow night. But yeah, that's sort of my journey. And now I'm just kind of happy to be working in TV. There's been a real sort of sea change from when I first started to now. You know, when I first started, when I did Noah's Ark, it wasn't, diversity wasn't in. It was very hard for people of color, gay people. It was very, very hard to break in to the ranks of television writing or television directing, because it was sort of like people hired their friends and all their friends were white. So I kind of stayed on the independent track and did my own thing, because my work was Black and gay, and I just thought no one really in Hollywood was kind of checking for it. And that ended up being the thing that kind of got the attention, and how Noah's Ark kind of ended up on TV, which I never intended to happen, et cetera. So, yeah.
So the two of you basically knew, for the most part, that this is an industry that you wanted to be in, and that's great. Mine was a little bit similar. I knew that I wanted to be a writer my entire life, but I didn't really understand how movies were made. I thought authors wrote books and somehow they got produced and ended up on television. You know, I'm in Houston, Texas, and everybody out there is into oil and gas, so nobody was teaching me anything about the film industry. So it wasn't until I was in my senior year in college and my mom sent me an Essence magazine article about a Black female TV writer. And that's when it was like, great, I got to go to film school. And so I went to film school. And while I was in film school, I went to Florida State University. And while I was there, one of my instructors pointed out that I'm really great at helping other people out of their plot holes. And he was being shady because he was trying to say I couldn't do that for myself. I caught that. But it actually opened up the door for me to make me realize, but that's the part of the process I like. I like helping other people get through their story problems. And so that's why I decided to go into development. And like you, Patrik-Ian, you said you didn't really know what directing was. I had no idea what development was, no idea. But it seemed like it was going to be the place where I got to give notes on story. So that's why I decided to go that route. And I eventually left and went to musical theater for 8 years and got to do some, Broadway national tours and things like that. And while I was doing that, people were still contacting me about their screenplays. So once I left musical theater and I came back to Los Angeles, I became a script consultant full time so I can help folks out. So since we have that same story about film school, I want to ask both of you, is film school necessary? Do you need film school to make it out here in LA? Numa, what's your point of view?
You don't need it to make it, but I think that if you want to go to film school, then you should go, if that excites you and there's a place for you that you're drawn to study at, and, a curriculum that you want that network, then I would never, try to discourage someone from going that route. I just, one of the pieces of it where I'm glad that I didn't is I don't have any student loans. So I really think that's a major crime that's being enacted on our youth and on Black people especially. And so I feel like film school should be free and all the schools we should be able to further our education. And maybe I would have, then. That's just not how the cards were stacked for me, but I've always taken my education very seriously. I put myself through my own education and finding, the best acting training that I could find that also had directors in class, and that, that was something that I paid for, but way less money than, going to, a larger institution in that way. But you still got to invest in yourself. There's still classes, there's still ways, but that just the university path, the college path was not mine.
Yeah. And how about you, Patrik-Ian? What do you think? Because you went to film school. So now that you've gone to film school and then you came out here into the industry to see, what's going on, do you think it's necessary?
It's certainly not necessary. But I kind of agree. If something you want to do, there's no reason not to do it. What I liked about film school was it kind of afforded me a playing ground, a structured playing ground to kind of learn, but also to create. So you got to pick the right place. It's not necessarily worth going into like a huge amount of debt. Thankfully, I didn't have student loans either. And there's all kinds of film schools. It's in a way, it's sort of like you really just need a program that has some equipment and some instructors who kind of know the basics. That can be community college, that can be something like LA Film School, which is not college, but it's a very specific sort of like film trade school. And you can also learn by doing. I mean, now I just shot the Noah's Ark reunion on iPhone 11 Pro, and it looks amazing. So literally you can, buy one of those little handheld Steadicam things for $100 and your iPhone, and you have a camera that you can make decent movies on that, will cost you nothing then after that point. So you can certainly read books, watch lots of movies. Before I went to film school, I There was no film program where I went to undergrad for the first 2 years, Brandeis in Massachusetts. And so I was taking courses at Boston University. I'd travel in a couple of days a week to take some film courses, but I bought a screenwriting book and taught myself to write. You know, literally, I found a book I liked. I wanted to adapt. I used that. I read the book, the screenwriting book. I adapted the book. So you don't have to go to film school. There's, you know, the internet is a wealth of resources. YouTube videos. You can learn how to edit. Anything you need to know how to do, you can learn how to do pretty much for free. So it's just about how much do you want it. You know, before I knew what film school was, I was writing stories in spiral notebooks, you know. So if it's in you, it's in you. It's just about finding the right way that you can afford, that's comfortable for you to learn and grow. And then trying to be smart about, you know, having a career, that's a whole other thing, you know.
Yeah, definitely. I think the majority of people did not go to film school. This is a place that cares more about the experience on your resume than they do the education. So you start to realize.
Sorry to cut you off, but yeah, you will find most of the, you know, executives, agents, producers, most of the people in Hollywood did not go to film school. A lot, you know, there's a lot of Ivy League people, but it's a lot of law degrees and this and that.
MBAs.
Very little, very few. Yeah.
Yeah, very few. And so because most people are coming from the outside, a lot of people worry about, like, should I be going to get this education before I come in? But Hollywood is the kind of place who cares about the experience on your resume, you know, far more than they do your education level. And even when you start to look at people's resumes, they put their education at the bottom. Like, it's not even the, you know, the first thing that people are concerned about. So definitely coming out here or figuring out, look, Google has to be your best friend, guys. Everything that you need is on Google. So learning your process, learning how you learn and figuring out on your own can give you just as much information, and trial by error. You know what I mean? Come out here and be a PA, get on somebody's set and just start figuring it out and asking those questions. So with that said, let's kind of go into the writing process. How did you figure out what you like to write? Let's start with Patrik-Ian.
Well, for me, I guess growing up and being gay, I kind of was curious about that always. I remember a high school English teacher at the end of the year, she would kind of say, like, what you were most likely to do. And I was most likely to ask, was that author gay? And and so I think, you know, so to a certain extent, I think that part of my identity was certainly, you know, a factor. Once I moved to LA and was sort of starting to write and trying to figure out what I should be writing, an older filmmaker, gay British filmmaker, Black, said to me when I asked what I should write next, and he said, write the story that only you can tell. And that's kind of been the sort of the mantra or whatever since then. So, which is why all of my original work really was Black and gay. And it was kind of, you know, it's kind of, for me, that was a very specific thing, because before I was doing it, there wasn't anything. Like I never saw anything. So it was really born out of like, oh, I want to see my friends or myself on a screen that I never see. My best friend who's a college professor and is dating a guy who has a small child, and like, well, that's an interesting life right there. So that's the kind of thing, I just wrote what I wanted to see, essentially. And that's been sort of the guiding light for me for the most part. Now, of course, I can write anything, you know, and I always tell people, you know, and people, this is funny, people used to ask years ago, it was almost as though you can't write anything else. And people would ask, well, can you? And I would say, listen, if you pay me, I can write anything you want.
Right, yes.
But if I'm going to spend my own time and energy for no money, I'm going to write the shit that I want to write. And this is what I'm writing. So, you know, ultimately, I think the lesson is follow your sort of heart's instinct, passion. It's in terms of subject matter, because if you try to write something that's going to sell or this, that, or the other, you're going to have a hard time.
Yeah.
really
And
making that fly.
Hollywood will definitely put you in a box. They're like, this is what you write. And it's like, hey, look, give me a coin, honey, and I will figure that thing out, whatever it is you want me to write. Okay, how about you, Numa? How did you decide or figure out or come to a place to say, these are the kind of characters I like to write. This is the kind of world I like to write.
Well, I spent part of my childhood living in a very small town in Washington State called Skamakaway. That was population 250 people, period. So they really called it a village, and we were definitely the only Black family there. And I was there for only 3 years and then lived in other small towns. But I remember living on that farm is really where my imagination really took off. And I didn't grow up on movies, so I never had a favorite filmmaker or favorite film growing up. I had to play catch up with that as an adult. But my mother watched soap operas all the time. And so I grew up on soap operas. And when I started writing at 7 and 8 years old, that's the type of stuff I was writing: dramatic, romance, with sometimes a little bit of a thriller aspect or suspense, because it was really just based on that's the programming that she watched. And I knew I was an actor too, because I would pretend sometimes I was in the soap opera and then assign my brothers and sisters these roles and pretend like our house was a hotel. And I was always just pretending that I was living in a different reality than I was. And that translated to my diary entries. And, I wrote every day in my diary. I was always trying to make sense of my life, always trying to escape the boredom of that place. Even at that age, reconciling with my identity, even at, the early ages of 7 and 8, I'm just trying to understand. I also came from a family where I was adopted, and there were 8 kids who were all adopted together. So I always felt, on the fringe and not understand, having like a lot of gaps and secrets and trying to understand my life. And I think all of that mixed together, plus just being on a farm, running in the pasture, having all these different animals that I would talk to. And it was just a very fertile ground for the imagination to grow. And I think that eventually deepened and expanded. And I started to have language for how to define that further, which has, really merged into caring a lot about centering Black women and our intimacy and our desires and our sensuality, and, seeing where that can take me in almost any genre, but always having kind of the nucleus of that, the fiber of that being in almost everything that I do. That's what excites me most.
Yeah,
So
that is so great
because, being a kid, and then, like those soap operas would be pretty racy too. And I think that always, that did impinge on me even as a young girl, the hot sizzling scenes that I was supposed to cover my eyes for, which of course you never do, Oh my gosh. And I just remembered this, my adoptive mother had diabetes, and she lost her vision due to that, but she still loved her stories, right? So I remember I used to sit on the edge of her bed with her favorite soap operas on. They run for decades, so you can watch the same show forever, no canceling. And I would tell her what was happening on the screen. And I'm like a young teenager. So sometimes, the love scenes would come on. She's like, what's happening? What's happening? And I would have to, try to, describe, well, Shayla and Michael are kissing now. They're on the bed. I just think all of those things, have fed me as a writer, as an artist. Those are all my early influences. So
that's where your acting began. You were acting it out for her.
And like I had, that was my first dream, was to be a soap star. So it always starts somewhere.
Yeah, I think it's so great that what both of you guys kind of said, because we always hear about write what you know. And I always explain that as, we like to put that in a small box of what we think we know, but we actually know a lot more. We know what our siblings know. We know what our parents know. We know what our spouses know. We know what our friends know because we're privy to that information. But I love the fact that you guys both said that what interests you was filling the gaps of what you didn't know, what you were trying to understand about yourselves or about the world around you. And therefore it made you kind of dive into that particular, subject matter, things that you didn't see, but you wanted to see. So you dove into that. That's so great. So then let's take that and start talking a little bit about process, because I know both of you are writer directors. Both of you have done things independently. So talk to us about how you start a project. Does it usually come from character, theme, world? And when you are writing, do you have to be like in your own quiet space? Can you be around people? Are you the kind of person who wants music playing? What are you doing? And how do you get through that process so that you can be working on several projects at the same time? Let's start with Numa.
Okay, well, I just want to say that I realized as I was saying that I still have a dream of being a soap star.
It's gonna happen. Put it out there. Yes.
Soap opera space has, changed so much, but I would still be so delighted to be a lead on a very soapy type of thing. Like I still love it. I still have a love for it, even though I feel like my work is touching different places now. But I just realized, you know what? I still feel excited about that. But as far as process goes, I get inspired by titles. I kind of can't really start until I have a title to something. And yeah, you will never see a project from me that's like the untitled, no,
I'm terrible at titles.
I will, be thinking about the idea of whatever it is, or even if it's something that happened to me that I want to write about, or, and I just have to once I get on final draft and I do that title page, I put that title in, and I'm
good.
But until that point, I'm racking my brain for the title. And I think that just it's a guiding post for me. Even if I'm not writing something, even if it's an event that I'm going to be a part of, I'm always like, what's the title? What's the title? And if I'm being sent a script, if the title doesn't spark for me, then we already have a problem. Or I'm like, can we change the title? Are you guys open to this? Because I don't know. That's just a thing that I have. And then I identify as a survivor writer. I have to find a way to write in any space at any time. I have a young child. I have a lot happening, and I've had to be able, and I think, maybe you can also speak to this. Sometimes you have to be able to change something right there on set. If it's not working, you've got to be able to kind of write in any in any circumstance. And I've learned how to do that. I've written in a car. I've written, you just have to be able to kind of like lock into that space with or without the noise. But I would prefer, to have lengths of time where I can just think and write and drink and dance and watch things and then write a little and, have your days on end where you can do whatever you want, whatever gets you there. But I don't always have that opportunity. But yeah, my process goes pretty much from title, I'm locked in, and then I have to kind of adapt to my circumstances to get the writing done.
Yeah, that's good. I'm glad you mentioned that, because I think we all think that there's this special place of writing that we can just get, like we're thinking it's misery, right? If we can just get this cabin out in the woods and be there for 3 months, we'll write.
Cabin, not misery.
Right. Like suddenly we're going to write the best Oscar-winning, screenplay ever. And it's just most people's lives just don't give you that kind of time and space. So what is it for you, Patrick?
It depends, sometimes deadlines and contractual obligations sort of rule the day. That's not always the best for me. But it is what it is. You know that you've got an outline due to the network by this date, and you just got to make it work. But I tend to, when I'm not in an office, writer's room or something, I have found working from home a bit problematic, meaning I just have not gotten into doing it as much lately. So before the shutdown, I was going to cafes. I had a sort of a little short list of cafes that I would go to every day for hours. Since, of course, I've had to work at home, then you just kind of do it because, like, I have a laptop. I'm used to writing anywhere, on an airplane, in an airport, So it's yeah, there's no special time or place. For me, I usually have an idea, sort of a nugget of an idea, and then that idea typically will live in my head mostly, sometimes for years before I really kind of write anything down. And then it's just sort of like, I'm trying to think how I can describe it. It's sort of like these little projects that end up sort of at different stages of development, and sometimes based on whatever is going on that week, that year, that month, you decide, okay, this is the time for this project now. And then it's just, again, where am I getting my paycheck? Where is my mind, and where am I inspired to go? The best feeling is when you're like, okay, like I just finished the Noah's Ark thing and I'm writing a TV movie. So I just turned in the final sort of treatment to the network before I go write the script. I'm just waiting on their sort of sign off. And so for the first time in a minute, a few days ago, I just didn't have anything I absolutely had to work on. I'm in negotiations for a job on another show that'll start in later this month. So there's nothing. And it was such a weird feeling. I thought, why do I feel so strange? And I realized, it's because there's no stress and there's no drama and everything's kind of lined up. So then I had to think, okay, what do you want to work on right now? Go through the list of the projects. Okay, this is what I want to work on. Boom, I'll work on that. So you need to be able to write anywhere. You need to be able to write on the fly. I remember getting the set, Being Mary Jane, one Monday, and Will Packer telling me, the rapper that was supposed to be in the show, Designer, Panda Designer, backed out at the last minute over the weekend. And we've gotten now this rapper, Dave East, is flying in. He's on a plane right now. And my first thought is, why didn't you guys call me on the weekend? I could have been involved in the process and we could have had this shit worked out by now, but I can't say that to Will Packer. I just got to do my thing.
He's saying it now,
though. So I got to quickly go on the thing, look up who Dave East is, because I don't know. That's a little too hardcore rap for my sort of knowledge. Go read about him, find some interesting stuff, kind of come up with an idea based on interviews and whatever I can find. As soon as he and his manager get to set, go into their trailer, sit down with them, pitch sort of interviews, it's like a little interview process, and then kind of pitch my idea. Are you okay with this? Kind of poking fun at a real life baby mama situation that I read about that he talked about. He was cool with everything. Then I have to write the script version. Everybody has to look at it. The showrunner back in LA has to look at it. Gabrielle has to look at it. Will has to look at it. And then we have to do it. But it's just like, it just is what it is. There's always a fire. There's something gonna happen every day, whether it's a casting thing, a wardrobe thing, there's always a fire. That's a part of sort of being a producer, and you just have to kind of roll with it, honestly. And nowadays with coronavirus, a lot of people are having to sort of do corona passes on their scripts because nobody wants to have like big crowd scenes now or stuff that's just going to be too difficult to control and deal with. So
yeah. My writing process is, sometimes it's a character that starts it, sometimes it's a world that starts it. For the most part, I am rewriting other people's stuff, or I am being hired to originally write somebody else's thing. So it's usually me trying to figure out what is it that you want and how I can, yes, put my creative spin on it, but I'm almost always contract writing. I contract write more than I write for myself. So I'm one of those people who's like, look, give me the coin and we'll figure it out. Let's make it happen. And write how we need to write. So I'm glad that you brought up the fires. And earlier you said something about having to get the outline to the network. So for people who don't know and don't understand that, can you explain a little bit about what it is to have an executive and how they give notes and how you deal with that kind of notes process? And we'll start with Patrik-Ian.
Yeah, so usually on a project, there's a producer, sometimes there's a production company, and there's a studio, and there's a network. So there's usually a team and everyone's involved in the process, sort of. So I deal with the producers and the production company that they're working with, sort of first, and then the network on top of that. So I send a new draft to the two Black female producers. They read it, they let me know if they want me to do anything. They share it with the production company, which is in this case kind of the studio. And then they like it, send it to the network, and the network weighs in. It's just sort of like, the trouble sometimes can be in the disconnect between those two entities. So sometimes the network wants things that the producers don't kind of agree with. The good thing is you're never required to take every note that you get. You usually get a bunch of notes. The thing you have to do is look for the note behind the note, or look for what's causing the note. Is there a bigger issue that the note is pointing to that you can fix that will then make that note obsolete? And so that's what you kind of have to think about. Well, why are they asking me to do this? They're missing something back here. So it's just about being true to your story, making sure you're going to make your story work, taking the notes that work, finding a way to convince them that the notes that don't work, why they don't work, or doing just enough to satisfy them and not fuck up your shit. It's a dance because you got people to satisfy, and you gotta, my thing, I always say, unless it's something that was born in my brain, unless it's one of my babies that I'm giving birth to, there's no hill that I want to die on. There's no hill that I want to die on for this Lifetime script that I'm writing that's adapted from a book. It's a lovely project. I absolutely love it. I want to do my best. I want to make it sing, but I want to give the producers and the network what they want. Mm-hmm. That is it. And put my creativity in that and make it good and make it something I'm proud of at the same time. But my goal is to give them what they want. And ultimately, if it's like I say it's A and they're adamant that it's B, okay, I will figure out how to make B work. It's just that simple. People get really precious. Writers, I've dealt with them as an executive. I've seen it happen. They get really precious about stuff that they shouldn't get precious about. So it's kind of,
And Numa, what's your take on it when dealing with notes from executives?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. When I get notes, I'm always figuring out just how to absorb them as fully as I can. And in the acting space, if you have a scene and there's trouble in the scene, there's something that's not ringing true, as you're doing scene study and trying to deepen your character work and make the scene sing as an actor. When there's a problem or a note, let's say from your acting coach, it usually has something to do with the moment before or a moment before. So, and not every executive necessarily understands that. There's a spectrum on, how deep in the capacity of every executive that you're working with. So you have to be aware of that, but also I like to bring in the other sides of my training and go, oh, okay, well, if I have this note, I should also be addressing things around it, similar to what you're saying. So I'll go back a few scenes or say, is there something that caused this ripple where this scene doesn't feel real anymore? This scene, it's just, why is everyone bumping on this moment, And so I usually try to track that backwards. And then if things are flowing really well, then I'll go to the other side. You know, you just have to really just try to manage it as best as you can. Definitely no dying on any hills. just do the work, you know, take the notes, respect the process, and, you know, be clear about what you're bringing to it. But there's no need to, and I've seen it too, being on the other side, there's no need to push back so hard for something that the majority of the team is wanting to go another way. And you know, all of that is not going to help you. So unless it's something really, you know, when we get into being the Black person in the room, and those are things to push back on. And those are things to, even after you let it go, to say, for the record, I'm not with it, you know, to be clear, you know, we definitely should be doing this. You know, I'm telling you that the lampoon is coming for you. You know, it's like, don't say I didn't warn you. But I'm not often in those situations because you can kind of smell them coming much earlier, but it does happen. But yeah, notes are, it's a process. You gotta, I don't think there's any field where you don't get notes in what you're doing, you know. But writing is very personal, and you feel like that ink is your blood, you know, pouring out of you. So I get that. I get how it happens, but that's where you have to turn your professionalism on.
Right. And understanding that it's just not personal. Every single person who's a part of this creative process, I think as writers, because we're often in our own space, at our computer or in our cafe by ourselves, we start to think that we are the creative process without realizing there's so many other people that participate in this process, and they have jobs to do. So it's not personal. They're just coming in to do their part of the job. And at the end of the day, if someone is mentioning it, all they're saying is there's a problem here. Because a lot of executives didn't go to film school. A lot of executives may have never written anything ever, right? So they can't necessarily always tell you this is what it is and this is what I'm feeling, etc. But if they're pointing it out, what they're saying is there's a problem here. How can you creatively solve it? Because that's your job as the writer, to creatively solve it. And then there are other times when they just have information that you don't have, you know, so they are telling you, yeah, we can't do this. You know, like we can't afford this place. We don't have these permits. This actor is no longer available. This, you know, and you're trying to, you know, push back. And they're telling you like, yeah, we have a fire. We can't do that. You have to now creatively solve this thing. So that's great for people to hear. You are going to continuously have people weighing in because that's their job. And each of those opinions coming in is what makes your baby the brilliant thing that, you know, that ends up on the screen. So with that said, really quickly, and then we're going to open it up to questions before we get out of here. But really quickly, I know people always want to know about pitching. So what do you think is the most important thing about pitching, about when you go into the room? What's the top thing that writers need to know? Let's start with Numa.
Great. I hate pitching. You know, it's crazy because I came from, when I built the platform, or was part of building the platform Black and Sexy TV, I never had to pitch anything. I mean, I guess it was kind of light pitching to the collaborators, to our collective there. You know, we would definitely, I guess that is pitching, throw out ideas about this and that. So it's not like I've never done it, but not in the formalized, for many years, I didn't have to do a formalized type of pitch that what you're talking about right now, because I was on the other side of like, if we think it's hot, if everyone's getting excited about this idea, we're just going to do it. We don't have to go through all this other thing. So I've had to learn the mechanics of that. But what I'm glad about, what I think I bring to the room that I think is important for everyone to do, is this sense of, you are going to make this anyways because you're that passionate about it. You know, it's like, it's more of an invitation to them to join you on it. You know, the clarity and the passion that you have coming into the room for your project should be so strong. that whoever you're talking to about it has the sense that you are going to get this thing made, period. That's how clear you should be. That's how excited and involved you should be. And one thing that a director friend shared with me that I use is to have some type of visual aid along with your pitch. Even if it's one strong photo, you know, maybe you haven't made the full deck or whatever, but even if it's one strong image or one video that you can pull up, you know, off of TikTok or whatever to show an essence and something cinematic towards it, that's also very useful to have in the room because not everybody's mind can see the things you're seeing when you're talking. So if you can just give them one thing, like I like to seal the deal with that, like, oh, let me show you this, you know. You know, this image really struck me as I was thinking about the themes of this and why I'm so excited, you know, to make this project, and that usually kind of brings everyone together. So
yeah, I'm glad that you have that experience and that point of view of not having to be the person who basically cold pitches. That usually you're talking to people who are kind of along this process, and you guys together are trying to figure out what the next steps are going to be. So for people who are out there, there are so many different ways that you get into this industry, so many different ways that people make their things. There's like no strict rule book about how you get in and what you have to do when you're here. So I'm glad that you pointed out that that's not necessarily your experience. That's great. Patrik-Ian, how about you?
What was the question?
What's the most important thing if you're the person going into the room who's pitching?
I mean, I guess it really just is to know your pitch, you know. It helps to practice it, you know, record yourself giving it and then listen back, and you'll kind of, that's really, I find helpful. And the visual piece is good. I tend to, I mean, it's a weird thing. Lena Waithe said something to me once. She said that she basically said, I don't believe in pitches. I just think always write the script. So obviously you can't always do that, but if you can, it is best just to write it, because then they see exactly what it is. But I'm a firm believer in pitch decks, you know, at the very least, 3, 4, 5 pages, that not a lot of words, just like a sort of visual telling of your basic premise, even, you know, pick out the sort of actors that you think best represent what the show should look like. If, you know, if you can't design, you can find somebody who has some graphic design skills, pay them $50 or whatever, and get them to sort of format a little something for you and put it together. It's like, you know, and there's all kinds of levels to this. People do like the most amazing productions, their video decks and all this stuff, and they'll pay hundreds of dollars for it. And that's fine, you know, that's fine. But ultimately, you need to be able to tell a compelling story and communicate verbally what is compelling about your idea. You need to be able to, you can't just think about the setup. You've got to be able to tell them, if this show is going to run for 3, 4 seasons, where is it going in these other seasons? What are the possibilities story-wise? How can we continue this and keep it fresh? So you really have to sort of plan out your whole concept and be able to really successfully communicate that. And then the rest is just, you know, the luck of they want your idea, they need your idea, they've got, you know, a slot for it, it works, you know, it's just a lot of stuff that you can't control. So you just got to do your best.
Right. And I'm glad you said that little last bit, because you're right. You can have the best pitch deck, lookbook, etc. But if you don't know your story, right, you don't know your characters, everything is about heart, right? Everything is about that emotional story that you're trying to tell. And if you don't know that information and you can't pull them in on that, it's not going to matter the amount of visuals you have. We're all trying to get to the place where you can walk in the room with nothing whatsoever and just say, hey, this is the thing I want to make, and be able to tell the people in 5-10 minutes, and they go, great, let's do it, right? That's where we're all trying to get, obviously. And when we're new in the industry, we're going to have to do a little bit more than that. But at the end of the day, it's always going to be about story. So if you don't have that other stuff and you really know your story, if somebody's interested in it, they'll take you through the rest of the steps to get to the stuff that you need. Okay, so we're having a couple of questions come in. And when I ask these, you guys can just, whoever wants to answer, we'll just have one person answer so that we can do maybe three questions. But one of the questions is about Michael Cole and giving up the $1 million at Netflix because of ownership. How do you guys, or either one of you who wants to answer, how do you feel about people of color owning their own stuff, copyright, etc., or if you have any other kind of opinion or thoughts about this in that situation? Either of you want to grab that question?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think that it was so great to read that and so necessary to kind of have some of that demystified. And I think that her series, I May Destroy You, is one of the most stunning things that I've seen in a long time. And yeah, I think it's definitely part of the new guard. Everyone is kind of talking about, things are pushing in to deeper spaces for our community and the content that's coming out. So, you know, with that being said, she definitely had more leverage having done, you know, and successfully done Chewing Gum and starring in, you know, a few different series. This wasn't her first deal. So, you know, when you get that first deal, a lot of people say, oh, you know, you always get screwed on the first deal type of thing. I don't like to necessarily subscribe to that, but yeah, there is a kind of taking advantage of, this is this person's first time, so we're gonna just offer them the minimum. And if they have a great rep that can push us further, we'll go further. I feel like I definitely had that experience in my first deal, you know, like it still felt like a lot to me. So, but I think ownership is so important for us as Black artists to find a way to retain that however you can with whatever leverage that you have, because these things that we're writing and that we're creating, they're properties. That's how they're talked about. And that's how we really need to recognize that that's what it is. And not only was she recognizing that and demanding that in this deal, she is telling a story that's so personal, that's so raw, that's her guts. And that is all surrounding consent and surrounding having boundaries about what is yours, your personhood. And that which you're bleeding out as a writer is that. So I think that there's a lot to educate around that, that you already have the leverage, even by just writing the thing, you already own it, you know. Right. And from there, it's how much of it are you willing to sell off in collaboration with larger entities, you know, to gain you a larger platform. So I would love to know more about, you know, I read that when she went to BBC, they gave her everything she asked for. So I'm wondering, so does she have 5%, the 5% copyright then? Like, I want to know what deal she actually ended up with now. Like, did she still get $1 million and the 5%, or did she get even more? Or, you know, like,
we want the tea. We need the blueprint.
The rest of the story, you know. So you walked away from Netflix. It was $1 million on the table, and you know, Netflix got money, so yeah, push back, you know, and all of these networks have money, so always push back. But the ownership part is that piece where they know they can get us, because we need money, you know, we need opportunities. And for a lot of us, it's our first time, and there's a feeling of scarcity around these things. So we don't even think to ask that, you know? So I'm so glad that she talked about it, because now a lot of us are hip to some game that we might not have even asked our rep to even ask about that, you know, and these are the things that are held back from us, you know. So she gave us another gift in just talking about that, because we don't talk about our deals, we don't talk about the nature of and you know, the fiber and the details of how deals go down, but we should more. And yeah, ownership is so important. Any way, anyhow. That's our 40 acres and a mule, you know.
Yes.
This is a form of land.
Yeah.
You know, and we need to retain as much of that as possible and grow that.
Yeah, and I agree, especially on the share and game thing, which is again another reason why I have the company that I have, because I feel like there's this gap between what people know in Hollywood and what the people on the outside know, and it's like, why can't we bridge that? So I'm so glad that she's talking about it so that the next person can know to have this conversation. Because the only other time that I ever really remember people talking about ownership in that way was when Tyler Perry was at TBS. When he first did his television shows, he was like, this is how many episodes I'm going to do, and I'm owning them all. And they were like, okay. And that's when it was like, oh, whoa, like this is a big deal. This is something that you can do. So just one more question before we wrap up. But so we have the pandemic happening. We have the murder of George Floyd, which for some reason made America go, wait, there's racism, right? So now people are talking about this thing as if it's new and diversity is suddenly on the table again. So do you think that Hollywood is going to start diversifying their writers' rooms, diversifying their hiring processes, etc.? And how do you play a role being in the position that you're in? Let's start with Patrik-Ian.
I think Hollywood will. I mean, they've already been doing it. You know, it even before all this happened, it had gotten to the point where if you had an all-white writers' room, you would be called out for it. Like that happened. In fact, I remember getting a call earlier this year. My manager hit me up and said, oh no, I'm in a Black male drama writers group. And so we share information and stuff. And someone sent out a notice about these two shows that were looking for Black writers, writer producers, because neither show had a Black writer in the room and they needed to get one ASAP. So that's kind of a different thing, a different day. And now this Black Lives Matter movement kind of resurfacing has just sort of crystallized that even more in a place like sort of Hollywood, which really considers itself very, very liberal. They're going to respond more to that pressure than other people are likely to. So yes, I think it will, but it's also about us speaking up. You know, Prentice Penny wrote a piece that was in the trade in Deadline this past week about it. We have to tell these stories. A lot of people are starting, there were some Twitter threads where people were telling stories about their experiences in the room, or their experiences going into these meetings, or, you know, there needs to be a conversation had about the extra hoops, that development hoops that people of color and women have to go through. Like Katori, what she had to go through on P-Valley, a white showrunner never would have had to go through it. It never would have taken 2.5 years to get that first season done. So there's a lot that needs to be talked about more. So I think it's also about us being very vocal and clear about what we need, what we experienced, and what we expect moving forward. So I think it's going to get better, but we got to be active in that.
Yeah. Definitely hoping it gets better. Definitely hoping it's not because the topic is trending. And I also look at it like we, you know, as Black people over the last, let's give it a decade, at least definitely these last 5 years, we've had a lot of people branch out and start their own production companies, right? So we do have people who are making their own stuff. The problem is they still have to go into a studio and pitch, and they're pitching to people who don't look like them. They're pitching to people who don't understand their stories, right? So as much as we need to diversify what's on the camera, what's behind the camera as far as writers, directors, cinematographers, editors, even down to our best boys, we have to diversify what's happening at the studios. Those executives have to be diverse, because if they don't understand the stories, then those stories don't get bought as much. And even when it comes to the notes process, right? How can you have someone who totally doesn't get this giving notes on it? Right? And then what is that and a lot of people don't want to put themselves in the position to say the wrong things when they're giving the notes, etc. And it's like, well, that's because you have to diversify who's at the very top, because like Numa said earlier, we see these problems coming from miles away. But if you don't have one of us in the room to tell you that the problem is coming, then you end up with the problem, right? So we have to be diversifying everything on every single level. Numa, you have anything to add?
Yeah, we just have to keep, holding feet to fire, and I'm just happy that we have all these tools and platforms to do it. Like we can say, so post a picture of your room.
Right.
I just want to see something. Just, post a picture of your room so we just want to see it. Yeah. And so it's like, you will be exposed, and I think that we're in a moment of relentlessness about that,
Yeah.
So you will be exposed, and be on guard for that, and so I don't really care if it's being done out of the fear or the shame of exposure. The hiring just needs to happen, and it needs to happen much more swiftly, and it needs to happen in much larger numbers. And we're not going to stop exposing all the places that are still not, because I think that along with all of this happening, there's still people that are going to try to kind of just slip through and get to the other side of kind of the media frenzy and just keep doing the same thing. So, but again, it's kind of another thing of where we're hip to game now. So all of us writers, all of us directors, all of us actors, executives too, are all out here like, no, we're not having it anymore. So it should continue to be interesting to, continue to reveal what the landscape really looks like.
Yeah. And I think it's just going to be up to us, those of us who are in the industry, those of us who are making our way up, to continue to educate, to continue to mentor, and to continue to hire, right? Because we get to hire our own publicists and our agents and our lawyers, and there are Black industry professionals on that side too, who often find that their white counterparts are being hired even by Black talent, right? So there's just so much that we can be doing to, put Black people in the editor's room and everywhere else along the process, definitely. So we're about to wrap up, but of course, you guys have a million fantastic things going on in your life. So tell us what you're working on now, or what you're most excited about that's coming up for you. Let's start with Patrik-Ian.
Oh, for me, it's P-Valley tomorrow. Yeah, everyone needs to tune in to P-Valley on Stars. Do not miss it. Be a part of it live, tweet, the whole thing, because it's going to be a hoot. Make sure you're there tomorrow night. Yep.
Awesome. And how about you, Numa? What do you have coming up that you're excited about?
I'm going to be there for P-Valley. I have been anticipating this, a big fan of Katori. I did not know that you worked on the project. Yeah. So yeah, but I'm going to be there. That's my lane. So I can't wait to see what you all did together on that. For me, I'm writing, I'm in development on a TV series, an original series called Toxic, that is going to be lovely and messy and real and raw. And
great title.
Take it, and it was all about the title, baby. I locked into that title. I was like, that's it. I know where to go now. I know exactly where we're going. Everything comes back to like, but is it toxic though? Yes, it is. So I'm really excited about that, because it's pulling from so many experiences that I've had and feelings and stories that I've heard, and really going deep inside a relationship that really spirals out of control between the partners that are in it. And then I'm directing a film for Netflix, and starring Gabrielle Union.
Nice.
Look at that Gabby connection.
Yeah, and it's like all Black down the line, for the
all Black. I have a project with Gab at Showtime, a series in development also. Like Black people in power, hiring Black people.
Yes, be booked.
Happen. So it's great because it's based on a book written by a Black woman, Teal Williams, called The Perfect Find. So that's the title, which I'm down with. I'm good. And then Lee Davenport adapted her book. I came in and did a rewrite, and I'm directing it. Gabrielle starring in it. It's like all Black women.
Nice.
It's really cool. So we're going to go into production probably early next year. You know, we're all a little bit in that holding pattern. So we're kind of in like a very soft prep for it right now.
Yeah.
So between that and the development of the TV series, I'm pretty busy. But yeah, exciting stuff. And I really miss being on set and being at work. So I can't wait until we're all able to do so safely. But until then, I'll be writing and dreaming and taking a lot of Zoom meetings.
So Numa, really quickly, somebody asked, so what happens if you've locked in on your title and then you start writing and something changes? It changes the course. So you have to go back and like get a new title? Are you able to keep writing? How does that work if you're along the way and you realize this title and this thing that I'm writing, they aren't going together?
Oh, it hasn't happened. That doesn't happen, because once I have the title, it's like my North Star. Like I know everything goes under that feeling and that theme from The Couple, which I didn't title, but I love that title. Roomy Lover Friends was like very, you know, it's Roomy Lover, you know, it just, that was the tone, feeling of it. JEZEBEL, I mean, like I couldn't get better than that title. That tells you the title tells you the whole story. So now I just have to go in there and find the details, and that's never led me wrong. So I haven't
I love that.
changed my own title. Once it clicks, I know I'm like, we have something here, you know.
Yes, I love that. You're like, no, it doesn't.
Like my nose, yeah. Having a nose for a project. The whole time I was at Black and Sexy, it was always like, we got to get that title in. You know, I remember when Hello Cupid came to us, it was untitled. And it was based on the kind of like OK Cupid world. So we were calling it that in the early development. And we were just like racking our brains. And I'm like, I like the Cupid part, but we can't call it OK Cupid, obviously. And so we were just kept throwing out different words to go with Cupid, you know, stupid Cupid. There were so many things with Cupid. And finally, I don't remember who said it, but someone said, Hello Cupid. And it's like, that's it. Like, that's a hit. Like, and that became one of our hit shows. So
that's great. Yeah, trust your process. Once you figure out what your process is, trust it. And Patrik-Ian, just in case some people, you know, keep hearing you say P-Valley and they're like, what are you talking about? Can you give us like a little bit, like maybe a quick log line and like where we find it, what time, that kind of stuff?
P-Valley is a gritty drama series set at a strip club in a small, dusty town in the Mississippi Delta. And it's based on a play by the award-winning playwright Katori Hall. The play is called Pussy Valley. And it's certainly unlike, I know a lot of women, a lot of people maybe get turned off by the idea of a show set at a strip club, but it is not. It's unlike any strip club show you've ever seen. It's written by a woman. It's from the female point of view. Katori spent months interviewing hundreds of dancers about what their lives are really like. And this is what she came up with. So there's a lot of amazing things in here. And it's just a beautiful work of art. Like the vision of it is so, you know, like they posted a still, someone posted a still on Instagram, and I remarked that it just looks like an Ernie Hudson painting. And the whole film kind of has this dreamy, you know, Katori calls it Delta Noir kind of style. So yeah, tune in tomorrow night on Stars.
That's awesome. And let's see, for me, I am currently rewriting 3 screenplays. One is a teenage kind of sci-fi film. One is more of like a drama, family drama with a little bit of a Christian lean to it. And then the other is also science fiction, but based in kind of like the Roman era. And then I am also writing an original pilot for a producer. I can't tell you what that's about because then it just gives it away. But it's, I would say it's still like family drama. It's like family drama. So I'm doing all of that and have to get it done, you know, in the next month or so. So for those people who are, you know, contacting me all the time saying, hey, can I get a rewrite? Rewrites will reopen in September. So if you
Booked and paid, honey.
Yes.
Hey,
So if you're looking for me to rewrite your screenplay, that will open in September, and all of the rest of my services, which include development notes, polishes, and proofreading and formatting for those of us who are just like, look, the English language is not my thing. I'm here for you. Services will reopen on August 1st. But thank you guys so much for being here. I don't know, Jasmine, are you going to come back in and give us a goodbye on our way out? Anything we need to say?
Bye. You guys, this has been so incredible. Like, we already went over time a little bit. I wish we had like 2 more hours to listen to you guys talk. You guys are a wealth of just so much knowledge, so much Black brilliance. And it has just been so great to have you guys participate in our film festival this year. Thank you so much. We've had a great time. Shannan, you've been an incredible host. I hope we can work more with you in the future. Numa and Patrik-Ian, I am such fans of you guys' work. Numa, Black and Sexy TV was my jam. When I would be bored at work at my old job, girl, I'd be on my computer just watching your shows. And it's so funny. I have to say this before we go. You talked about the Gabrielle connection. I actually have that connection with you guys too. So I think we all have that 1 degree of separation.
Okay.
I got to interview Gabrielle when she came to Seattle for her book tour a couple of years ago. So we all have that in common.
Oh, you know what? I forgot. I have a Gabrielle connection too. I worked in casting on her show Night Stalker at ABC back in the like early 2000s. It didn't, make it too far, but I was there in casting at ABC for her show Night Stalker.
See, so we're all family now. We're all related.
Yeah, we are.
Thank you, Gabrielle Union. Thank you. But this has been incredible. Thank you guys for being here and being a part of this. We'll keep this up on our Facebook so people have the opportunity to rewatch it if they missed it. And again, you can support Langston in the Seattle Black Film Festival by going to our website at langstonseattle.org/donate and drop us a few dollars to support this work and support the creatives in our community. Yes. So thank you guys again. I hope we can all connect real soon and continue the good work, and we'll be following you. And I'm going to pay to watch your show tomorrow, Patrick.
Yeah.
Thank you.
But we're going
to
get on it and watch it just to support you.
That's awesome.
Cool.
Thank you guys so much.
Thank
have
you.
a great afternoon. And for everybody else, we'll be back at 4 o'clock for our first film set of screenings. We'll be showing some youth films and some great stories. So we'll be live right back here at 4 o'clock. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.